You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
It is time to see if Rosie's boy Will Farmer will make another appearance in the chat today on Leafs Morning Take. It's the Tuesday edition. Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill. How we feeling, buddy?
We're good, man. Nice little Tuesday here. Let's get this guy on the show maybe if he wants to go back and forth. I don't know if he's got the balls to show his face or his name, but we'll see.
I don't see him in the chat right now. I should have mentioned last night a bunch of the Leafs Nation crew went to the Blue Jays game. You talk about depressing Toronto sports teams. The Blue Jays are among them. Couple innings in, that game was over. We had a good time, though. We missed you, though. I will say that.
Yeah, that would have been fun. I haven't been to a game in some time, but yeah, they're not doing too hot, are they? Not that I follow like crazy, but
dude, I was discussing this at the game. Our acceptance, generally speaking, of mediocrity in this market needs to stop, okay? Like, plain and simple, we got two bozos running the Toronto Blue Jays from Cleveland. They got no clue, absolutely no clue what they're doing with this franchise. And then, in turn, I'm subjected to going to these games and just figuring out really, really quickly that the team is dog shit and they're trending nowhere and they don't want to make any trades. It's mind-boggling, but it reminds me a lot of the Leafs sometimes.
it does, eh? I don't know if the city accepts mediocrity, but they get it once in a while. And I don't know, what are you supposed to do? I'm not a big baseball guy. I don't know where they were supposed to fall this year, but I got, people around me that follow them, and all I ever hear is they're getting smoked. They score 1-2 runs a game, and now they're like, wasn't Gosman in last night and didn't do very well?
Yeah, he got spanked. He got spanked.
Well, more attention on the Leafs. More attention on the Leafs. They're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, just more so like, I put it this way. I was promised a Maserati when the Jays were linked to the two best players in baseball last offseason, and I was given a Prius. There's a guy who goes by IKF. Dude, they rushed to go sign this guy. Nobody wanted him. They're like, hey, let's give you an additional year on your contract. They got Justin Turner, who's 39 years old. It's like, I could have told you, as somebody who's got no vested interest in the game whatsoever, I don't work in the game, I could have told you you're going to be dog shit. And surprise, surprise, the two guys running the team are the only ones who are shocked, baffled by the way this team has started this season, man. I'm just so over it. I'm a big-time baseball guy. You couldn't even pay me to go to a Blue Jays game. I've been to two this year, haven't paid. I will not be paid to go to a Blue Jays game right now. They're that bad, and it's frustrating as hell because 5 years ago, they were outstanding and they're a must watch. Like, they can't score, they can't field, they can't pitch. It's ugly, man.
Tough days, tough spring for the Toronto sports fans. But like I said, the big time ticket in town is heading in the right direction, baby.
Hey, love the positivity. There's a lot of moving parts to the Maple Leafs. I want to start with a story from yesterday. There's a bunch from yesterday, but according to TSN's Darren Dreger, the Leafs could be eyeing former Isles head coach Lane Lambert to join Craig Berube's staff. I would anticipate over the next couple weeks, we're going to find out more one way or another on the likes of Guy Boucher and others when it comes to the coaching staff. But I think they're certainly looking for a vet, and a guy like Lambert would fit the bill here.
Yeah, I guess I can't say I know much about him, to be perfectly honest, but it's nice that Berube, as long as he's been in the game, he's going to have his eyes on people. He's worked with many different people, and with the meetings they have, and to get an awareness of what direction they want to go, what the vibe needs to be. Craig doesn't know these players inside and out. Obviously, he's been out meeting them. He's called them. He said he's met most of them by the time they announced his signing. So he's getting to know the players, but after all the meetings and getting together and what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what's this guy like? What does this guy need? What's the vibe of, you go through all those things with the powers that be in those meetings and whatnot, and you get a sense of what's needed. And then, Craig takes his experience and says, okay, this guy seems to fit the bill of the direction that this group needs to go in and what they need. And he's going to, he'll have some input from others, but I think at the end of the day, it's probably going to be him deciding who's going to be beside him on the bench and going through the day-to-day activities. So again, I don't know a lot of these guys inside and out, but the one that gets hired is going to be someone that everyone's definitely comfortable with and feels like will help that group in the locker room get to where they want to go.
It should be that way too. Like, I feel like you'd be playing catch up if you don't get to bring in your own crew, especially if you're somebody the ilk of Craig Berube's won a cup in the last 5 years. It never made sense to me why you would half-ass the job. you're going to bring in a new head coach, he should bring in his own guys, and that's the way business should be conducted. I know Sir Bob Laws writes in, Lane Lambert looks like a Bond villain. I couldn't agree more. I always gauge things on if people will come on this show or not. I reached out to Lane Lambert last week when the news officially hit that he was attached to this job. I got no response. I got a couple of responses a couple months back. So it leads me to believe something's happening here, Rosie. Those are my sources. We were talking off air about this. Just the amount of pollution on social media right now where everybody's got sources, Rosie. Pollution is what I call it.
I know, and I stay away from it. Like, I just don't care what a rumbling is or what rumors are. Like, let me know when there's something concrete. But
Yeah.
checking out Lane Lambert, he does kind of look like a Bond villain.
Yeah,
Someone
he's
that would
wicked.
could probably bark a little bit, but good head of hair on the guy. Like, respect for that. Good stuff. Good stuff. We'll see.
It's true, too, because you watch Sheldon Keefe's presser, man, and you remember his presser when he joined the Maple Leafs, full head of black hair, and then 3 days in, he had gray everywhere, and now he's just full gray. Like, the guy's not 60 years old. He's like, what, mid-40s?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's
Stress.
true. If does stress lead to gray hair or what? I don't know. I got buddies that lost their hair in their mid-20s. It doesn't make sense. There's no reason for it. But I know you look at lots of guys. I remember Obama looked young and spry when he took over the presidency
Yeah.
in the States, and by the end of it, he was beat down. But stressful jobs, they're exactly that. They are stressful. And anyone who's taken on this role is gonna feel it. But the dangling carrot ahead of everyone is if you win in Toronto, I mean, they're so starved for something to hang their hat on in any type of recent memory that you would literally, you want to talk about Mitch Marner being a god walking around there. Those guys haven't got anything done, have been nothing but failure, and they're still
True.
treated like gods because of the Toronto Maple Leafs and the history and that city and what it is. So to win there, that's the dangly carrot in front of everyone who comes here is if you get the job done here in any way, shape, or form, it will not be forgotten, man. So that's why they go through the stress. That's why they take these high-end jobs that are highly scrutinized.
You're so right because just look at the Maple Leafs in the last 60 years, but specifically the last 30 years. With the due respect to these individuals, Darcy Tucker, Curtis Joseph, Doug Gilmore, they're viewed as gods. Ultimately, what do they do? Did they win anything? No, it's the same thing that we'll be thinking about Marner and Matthews and Tavares and Nylander if they can't pull through. So it's a really good point. I would add too, somebody who knows a thing or two about coaching. Rick Bowness is going to drop by in about 10 minutes or so here.
He sure does know a thing about coaching, man. I want to pick his brain a little bit. Like when you talk about, I don't know, it's getting later in time. Like when you talk about 25 years ago, you think that's kind of like, that's 85 or 90. It's just not like, so to look at Rick's DB and it goes back to like the mid 70s, like there's a lot of people alive that can't even comprehend that. Like it sounds like ancient times or whatever, but the decades click by and I'm sure they went fast for him. The older you get, the faster they go. But you look back at his body of work in the National Hockey League, and it's astounding. And he left on his terms after being announced. He didn't fizzle out or just kind of drip off and go somewhere to die. He was a Jack Adams candidate his last year with a heavy team that was number one in the league at parts of the season. Like, talk about a career, man. Unbelievable. Not many guys can stay in the game that long.
And the best thing about it, there's not one person I've ever spoken to that's talked ill about Rick Bowness. Everybody's like, oh, Bones, he's the best. He's got the best stories. He's great to work with. And I think that speaks glowingly about the human. And the other thing that, too, he's just retiring from coaching. So listening to some of the interviews he's done around media the last week or so, and we're going to have him on in about 10 minutes, he's not done with the game. So potentially in media or in management or something like that, he's just wrapping his career up when it comes to coaching. And you're right. You summed it up perfectly. To go out the way he did, having the year he did with the Winnipeg Jets, to be a finalist for the Jack Adams, pretty damn impressive job by Rick Bowness. So he's coming up at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. We're just a couple of followers away, subscribers away from 11.7 thousand. So we're inching closer to 12K, which is fantastic. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review wherever you're checking us out via podcast form. And go on over to the LeafsNation.com. I just put up a new article today about how the Leafs have to put their foot down against the Marner camp, which we're about to talk to in mere seconds. The opening segment is brought to you by Greta Bar YYZ. For a good time, find Greta, 590 King Street West. In fact, I was there last night. Their chicken sandwich is outstanding. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60-plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. So we have a development in the Mitch Marner situation, Rosie. Here we go, buddy.
Oh, do we? What is the hot development in the jostling of public opinion today?
Yes, this is public posturing, in my opinion, at its finest. But Elliotte Friedman from 32 Thoughts, the podcast, on Sunday, late Sunday, early Monday, saying one of the things a few people have told me is not to be surprised if this plays out over next season with Marner in Toronto. Then Pierre Lebrun adds from The Athletic, and TSN, of course, added the Marner camp currently has no plans to discuss an extension on our trade list. Their preference is to honor the last year of his contract and see where things go. What are your thoughts on that, Rosie? You ready to run it back with the core four, bud?
Interesting. Well, I think I said this after the playoffs. I said, emotions are high and tempers are a little hot, and people want to point fingers, and we did as well. And I think in my mind, the finger was pointed at the right spot with, again, with the contract situation, the salary cap situation, and the way this roster is built. You funnel it down, and it comes down to Mitch Marner. And what do you do? And I think, again, it's not like seething, you're awful. It's strategically from a roster standpoint. If you extend this player, you are basically signing up willingly for more of the same that you've had in the last 8 years. You cannot say that they haven't given it a good run. You cannot say that they haven't tried many different ways of running a roster constructed this way. They have. And they've beefed it up, and they've gone through changes, and they've done coaching changes, and they've done it all, and it's been more of the same in the playoffs. So we talk about running it back. People were like, it was pretty split last year. Are you going to run this back? You're crazy to run this back. You're crazy to run this back. They did first round exit after a sterling regular season. So to do it again, I'm sorry. Like, he's a valuable piece. If Mitch Marner was a bum and not good at hockey and useless to the team, we wouldn't really even be talking about him. We're talking about him because he's a valuable asset that you can move in order to make your team good. You can't just get rid of bums and get gold in return. It has to have a high value. And Mitch Marner is an all-star. He's a high-value guy. He gets tons of points in the regular season. And he could be an essential piece to someone in the offseason with a different construction. But the way this team is built, it's just the overwhelming consensus, I'm sorry, always was to see if we can move Marner and open some things up and change the identity of this team that's more suited for the playoffs. And now that, the tempers have gone down, people have kind of forgot. It's all like, it's starting to change. And whether that's his camp trying to posture and trying to get leverage and be in the driver's seat, there's lots of that going on, believe me, behind the scenes. But I mean, people do kind of forget. And now, the sentiment is softening a little bit on Mitch Marner, you could say, for some people.
Oh.
But in my opinion, it's like, okay, if you want to not do this with Mitch Marner, then you, by definition, are signing up to run it back. And I don't know if I'm prepared for that.
I'm not. I tell you, I had self-imposed diarrhea last night, and it wasn't from the Blue Jays' loss. This is sickening. If you're taking this at face value, this information, you're an idiot, okay? There's a method to this madness. There's no surprise that somebody was in the chat yesterday just speaking glowingly about Mitch Marner, okay? That's all I'm putting out there. I'm choosing not to read too much into this, Rosie. It is June 4th. If anything, I think this is like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to step the fuck up if you want to trade for Mitch Marner. Now is the time. And I think the best way to handle this for both parties is behind the scenes. If we're hearing information on it, it's probably not going to go well. You're probably not going to get the best value. But to sit here on June 4th, and I'm not discounting the insiders. They're the best at what they do for a reason. But I think this information was leaked for a reason too.
Yeah, agents are, they're lawyers. They understand, how to work a public opinion and the way the light that someone's looked at, and it's part of their job. And at the end of the day, the only thing they care about is getting the best and the most for their client, and they're going to do it by any means necessary. And especially here with a Mitch Marner in the market of Toronto, there is public posturing and there is leaked information and there is swaying public opinion and trying to get the leverage and trying to paint someone into a corner and just trying to put yourself in the best position for negotiations. And at the end of the day, this does come down to Mitch Marner has to sign something to allow any movement to happen, bottom line. So I haven't talked to Mitch Marner. I don't know where his head's at. I don't know if he's thinking, yeah, let's get the hell out of Toronto, but let's get it in the best position we possibly can. Like, would he want to be traded for a lot and then have that, that trade go well for Toronto, or would he want it to be less so that if he leaves Toronto and has success, what they got in return would be, he could say, how did that work out for you? Like, there's all kinds of things. And depending on who he is and what he wants, and you got to think that if he is going to make a change and he's open to it, why not get it going in before the season? But if we start creeping into August and nothing's happened, then I could see it being a little bit of a stalemate. But to say that right now, I think is silly. We still have the draft. We still have free agency. Lots of things move and shake during those periods of time.
Moral of the story, man, they have to have a backbone. What I've seen negotiation-wise in the last decade, most recently with the previous administration, is just not going to fly. If you're just going to lay down and die and you're going to let the Marner camp dictate this whole process, the wrong people are running this organization. There's ways to put your foot down. You know what it is? Call the Marner camp. We don't want you on this team. Okay? There are different strategies you can employ to make this move here. That's all I'm saying, right? Like, I think the fact that this story comes out and it's like, oh, well, Marner dictates the process. I'm not completely sold on that either.
Well, but you got to be careful, because when you're dealing with that situation with a player, there's a chance that it doesn't get done, or a deal, maybe he wants out and you want him out, and a deal doesn't come by that makes sense. No one's biting, and then all of a sudden the guy's on your roster still. So it's tough. It kind of reminds me of arbitration, where you have to go in and your team that you're going to sign with eventually, most likely, is going to rip you in every way, shape, and form, and then you got to go work together after. It's difficult. So you want to avoid that situation if possible, and try to be a little bit delicate about it. And I'm sure they are, but at the end of the day, there is a pulse on the situation after you talk to Marner and his camp, and we don't know exactly where they're sitting, but I think that Treliving, for example, would have a better understanding of that than us.
Got a lot of experience. So does today's guest. So we're going to lead on him for information and thoughts on this whole situation, as well as his marvelous coaching career. This interview is brought to you by Wendy's, the home of fresh, never frozen Canadian beef. Whether you order a Baconator Dave single or even a JBC, Wendy's only ever uses fresh Canadian beef that's never seen the inside of a freezer. Download the Wendy's app, check out the latest deals, and order today as you bring in the one and only Rick Bowness. What's going on, Bones? How are you?
Doing great, thanks. How are you guys this morning?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this. First and foremost, congrats on a great coaching career. Any idea what you're going to do next year?
No, I don't. Listen, I've retired from coaching. I haven't retired from life. I'm open. I want to stay involved in the game in some capacity. So it's just retiring from the coaching. Going to take this summer to kind of reevaluate everything, and we'll go from there. We'll see what happens in the fall.
Rick, I look at your hockey DB, and it's just one of those ones that you look at where you just scroll and scroll through the decades. It's incredible. But I want to ask, you're drafted in 75. You have a very solid, very respectable playing career in the NHL. And as if that wasn't enough, that's just a blip on your hockey DB when you get into the coaching. Did you know when you were a player that that's something you wanted to get into to that degree?
You're being very kind about my playing career, because I wasn't that good, which is why we bounced around a little bit. But I think near the end of my playing days, which was like 27, 28 years old, I knew then that, listen, my career wasn't going to last as long as we had hoped when I was drafted in 75. And I knew I wanted to stay in the game. So fortunately at that time, I was with the Winnipeg Jets, and the general manager at that time, John Ferguson Sr., he and I had a great rapport. He was the one who traded for me back in 1980 from the St. Louis Blues. And we had talked about, okay, when the playing days were over, would you want to get into the coaching? And I said, absolutely. So we did a contract, and those days you did it by yourself and you could do different things. But I had a clause in my contract that here was what I was being paid for playing, and there was a clause B that, okay, when you get into coaching, this is what you're going to be paid. So we fortunately, John Senior helped me get into it. He knew I wanted to have a passion for the game. He knew I wanted to stay in, and he helped me along the lines to get to where I am today without question.
What was your favorite part about coaching?
Everything. You really, honestly, listen, I've been fired more than once, more than I'd like to be. And, there's a lot of highs and lows that come with the coaching, as you know. But listen, I love the game. And when you love the game and you have the passion for the game, you find a way to overlook all the negatives that happened to you during your career. And, fortunately, I had my wife, Judy, support me all along the way, because there was times that, I got to look at her and say, and I'm waiting for her to say, Rick, maybe you should try something else now. But that never happened. It was all, where are we going next? And so we were, listen, we were, as you guys know, we were a hockey family. And listen, I loved everything about coaching. I love the challenges. I love the rapport you build with your players. I love the excitement of the game. I love the playoffs. And there's some tough times along the way, but it's your passion for the game that has to carry you through those. And I was asked the other day, what are you going to miss the most? I'm going to miss all of it. And I love being behind the bench. I love the practices. I love working with the players, trying to make them better, both as human beings and as men as on the ice. So I'll miss everything about it. But I also know that it was time. And it's been almost 5 decades. And and I think somebody told me a long time ago, you'll know when it's time. I kind of knew it was time.
What are the specifics behind that? I know I didn't play or was involved in the game not even half as long as you, but after the amount of time I spent, the thing with me was packing up every fall and packing up every spring, having 2 places to live and manage, negotiate, never really unpacking your suitcase. It felt like I just wanted to put some roots down. And that was when it was it for me. When you got family and, as supportive as my wife was, it was up to me, but I was excited to not have to go move to who knows what town. Was that something that was in your mind, or what was the kind of deciding factor where you were excited to call her a career and not have to do anymore?
Well, I guess the whole thing, I go back to 1999 and my wife and Judy and I and Kristen were going to Phoenix. My son, Ricky, was going to Dalhousie in Halifax. And my daughter or Ryan was going to Brampton to play junior hockey. And I think at that point we said, okay, where's home going to be? So the boys were both born in Halifax. Judy and I went to high school together in Halifax. So we built a home back in Halifax. So all those ups and downs and the moves and everything, we always had a home base. We always know where home was. And right now, like, my daughter works for the Predators in Nashville. Ryan's obviously in Ottawa. My son, Ricky, and his wife live in Denver. If you went to them and said, where's home? They'd all say that the house in Halifax is their home. And that was important to get over all the moves and the packing and everything else. Plus, Judy, everywhere we went, Judy just said, this is our home. We never rented a house. We always bought once we got into the coaching. So the kids knew this was their home. And Judy always said, it doesn't matter where your home is. Your home is regardless of the city. And she always just told the kids, this is your home right now. So that helped. But having the home back in Halifax was a huge help for us to get through all the moves and the packing and everything else, because by the end of it, you always knew, okay, end of the season, we know where we're going. End of the career, we know where we're going. And the summer vacations for the kids, they knew where they were going. So that helped stabilize the family life without a doubt.
Talk about a power family, and you talk about power. How much are you going to miss Connor Hellebuck, Laurent Brossoit? I always, like to bring up the fact about goaltending. We talk about this being a Leafs show, I should say, quite a bit. Can you speak to the dynamic of having, a stud netminder or trusting your goaltending, and what's that done for your career?
Great goaltending makes good coaches, right? Without a doubt. This game is becoming more and more relying on your goaltender. It is. And the game is so faster now than it's been ever been. It's more highly skilled players are creating more offensive chances. No matter what the coach does in terms of a game plan of everything, you're going to need saves. And fortunately for me, the last 25 years, I've been fortunate. I've had great goaltending. I go back to Vancouver, 7 years there. We had Luongo. He was just, a franchise goalie. Went to Tampa for 5. We had Vasilevsky. We had Ben Bishop. Dallas, we had Ben Bishop. And then Winnipeg, we have Hellebuck and Lauren Brosson come in this year and was outstanding for us. But you don't win in our league with average goaltending. You just don't. Average goaltending means inconsistent goaltending. And you're not going to win. You're not going to get very far in the playoffs with average goaltending. You need elite goaltending in our league today, more so than ever. And we're fortunate in Winnipeg to have Bucky, because he was outstanding. Obviously, he's going to win the Vezina, or he should win the Vezina. And we had a great signing last year, bringing in. Yeah, so he was outstanding for us, and that really helped us as well.
I bet.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Can you talk a little bit, like, through the generations and decades that you coached? I mean, I even noticed it. You get different generations of players coming in with different culture, different backgrounds, different ideas of how things go. How much did you have to adjust your coaching style according to the new generations of people that are coming through your teams?
Well, I've always taken pride in my ability to communicate with the players. And again, the players, the coach has to adapt to the players. This generation is different than the last generation, but they're not going to change. So the coach has to adapt to the generation that he's dealing with. But when I first got into coaching, I always said, I want to coach the way I wanted to be coached. All I wanted to know as a player, tell me where I stand, tell me what I need to work on. Just let me know, if there's tough conversations, there's tough conversations. You have to have them. But the biggest thing with today's player is they need that communication. They need to know why we're doing things more so than ever before. So we're doing this now. What's the next play after that? So the players today, they're more highly skilled, but they want more answers. They need more coaching, because no one's going to the minors for 3 or 4 years anymore to figure out how to play. They're kind of rushed into the league now because of the skill level, and they are ready with the skill level, and you've got to help them along the way. But the biggest thing, regardless of the generation, is it's that ability to communicate with your players. As you know, better than anyone, you have to build a trust. The coach has to build a trust with the players. Now, you're going to have different relationships with every player, but there has to be a trust that the player knows you have his best interest at heart. And if he does these things, he's going to make the team better. And the team game is what has to be sold more so now than ever before to these young players, understanding the team game, and the success comes from the success of the team, not how many goals you put up. So but those things only happen with communication and building that rapport and building that trust with each player.
So you saw the Leafs a few times this season. What were you able to see up close with this team?
Yeah, we only saw them twice, and I don't follow the Leafs as close as everyone else does. But a lot of respect, man. They've got a great team. They've got a lot of skill. And listen, there's only going to be one team happy at the end of this year, as we all know, and that's the team that walks away with the cup. Everyone else has to get better in some areas. They do. Even the losing team in the finals, they're not good enough. They have to get better. So every team has to get better. I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for Brad Treliving. He does a phenomenal job as a general manager. Love Craig Berube. He's a great coach. So those two guys are going to identify the issues that they need to get better and have a better shot at the Stanley Cup. But the Leafs, honestly, we went into Toronto. We played one of our better games all year. We lost 1-0 in overtime. Matthews scored a goal, but I think they had 4 scoring chances the whole game. We had a 2-0 on penalty kill. We had great opportunities. Their goaltending was great, and then they beat us in Winnipeg. But ton of respect for the skill level of that team and the players that are on that team. And again, I have nothing but respect for both Tree and Chief, that they're going to do a great job with the Leafs this year. They're identifying what they need to get better and have a better shot at the Stanley Cup. But again, they've got the nucleus of a great hockey club. Now it's just putting in the right pieces.
Yeah, what's your thoughts lately on the revolving door of coaches? It seems like it's win now, has to happen. Everyone's on the time crunch, and the quickest way to kind of shake things up is to remove and replace a coach. Do you like that mentality? Do you think it's effective? And what effect do you think Craig Berube could have on this group right away?
Well, he's a different voice. He's just listen. He's won the Stanley Cup, so he's got that pedigree behind him. But I don't like the fact that there's 19 coaching changes in the last 2 years. Listen, everything today is the coach's fault, and that's wrong. It really is. Like sometimes the team just doesn't play well. The team just doesn't gel. There's a chemistry issue, whatever it is. Every issue that goes wrong cannot be the coach's fault. It's the reality of the world we're living in now. Players have the 8-year contracts. They're more business partners now with the owners because of those contracts. Everyone's working under a salary cap. There's more pressure on every team now to win than ever before, to get into the playoffs. And sometimes, like, you get in the playoffs and you lose, well, everybody's upset again at the coach. Listen, it's both. It's the coach needs the support, and the players have to know he's the guy. He's not going anywhere, and that helps the coach build that locker room. But if there's always an easy out, and what you mentioned, like, okay, let's replace the coach, that permeates through the locker room. And okay, if we don't do well now, the coach is the guy that's going to go. And so there's a comfort level with our players that has led to all of this. And listen, they earn their contracts. They got nothing but I'm happy for them. Whatever they get paid, the security they get, as much as they can make, that's fantastic. Good for them. That's what being a player is all about. But there also has to be accountability to both coaching and the players. Everything that goes wrong can't be a coach's fault. It just can't. And some players, they have a bad games, they're having a bad stretch. Okay, the coach has to work with them to get through it, but the player has to take some accountability for that as well. And so it just seems we're living in a world today. And listen, if you have thin skin, don't get into coaching, especially today. But it's the world we live in, and I don't like it all. But there's 19 coaching changes, and I'm in there. But I retired. I'm the only guy that's done that. So I just don't like the fact that the easy way out for every organization now is to blame the coach.
It's not right unless you go to Barry Trotz school and you become a GM, then you last way longer, right? I think for some weird reason, like GMs, and we love Trotzy on this show, we had him on last year, but for some reason, like GMs just last longer, and I couldn't agree more. But luckily in this market, we're blaming players when we cover the Maple Leafs. The Mitch Marner conversation is a polarizing convo for sure as we inch closer, obviously, into this offseason. What do you make of Marner as a player? And, obviously somebody with the pedigree and the resume and the experience you have, can you maybe just speak to like working with star players and kind of the internal conversations that happen behind the scenes when trying to figure out what to do with somebody of the ilk of a Mitch Marner?
Listen, Mitch Marner it's a world-class skill, and I have nothing but respect for the way that guy plays the game. You can't win without the goal scorers. You can't win without the skill, no matter what. You got to have the goaltending, you got to have the coaching, but you better have that skill to finish it off. So, there's conversations. Again, these are conversations that the coach can't be afraid of, and the player has to be receptive to what is being told to him. And if there's changes to the player's game that have to be made in order for him to help the team win more, then those conversations have to take place. And if the coach is afraid of those conversations, that's one thing. If the player doesn't like what he's hearing and refuses to change, that's another thing. But if you're going to win the Stanley Cup, those conversations have to happen. And it's with every player. It's with every elite player. And you hope to, that they buy in. And again, it goes back to what I talked about earlier, the team game. The team game has to come first. It does. That's where the success comes from. And then you have a total buy-in. And regardless of the skill level, regardless of the role, the status of every player they're important to the team. The high-end skill guys, yeah, they mean more. Do they have to make some changes to their game? Usually they do in order to win. I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl, they've clearly made changes to their game to get them back into the finals. So good for them. But Mitch Marner, have nothing but respect for his skill level. He's got a great hockey IQ. And again, the Leafs, they'll figure out what's best a lot more than I know. But I just have a ton of respect for the man as a player.
What's it like in this situation? Say a team does want to move on from a player, but this day and age, a lot of high-end players have no move contracts. So when you're having those conversations you talk about, is it that much more delicate, being as you don't really have the power to, make change without them being on board? Does that make it more delicate and difficult to have those conversations you're speaking of?
But you still have to have them. And again, you can't be afraid of them, and you got to lay it all on the table. I mean, you can't walk out of those conversations, the player questioning It's got to be black and white. It can't be gray. And you can't be afraid of those conversations. And the player can't be afraid to sit there and listen and accept it. Okay, you know what? We didn't win the Stanley Cup. I got to make some changes. And to me, it always goes back to that. If you want to win the Stanley Cup and you haven't won it, then you got to be willing to make some changes to your game. The coaches, we have to change. There's no question. There's a lot of onus on coaches to change daily, right? Pretty much now. But the players have to be willing to change as well. And then it's up to the player and the organization to figure those things out.
Lastly, I just want you to put something to bed. I know a picture went viral recently of Craig Berube speaking with Mitch Marner in a coffee shop. This is a common practice for a new coach coming in, regardless of contracts, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, again, it's building that relationship right away. I'll just use my example in Winnipeg. When I took over 2 years ago, man, I made phone calls and talked to every player. I needed input from every player to see what they were thinking about, to see what they see as the team. How do we get the team better? How do we get you better? And you have to have those conversations. So good on Chief to do that. But again, that's building those relationships now, before training camp. That's building the trust between a player and a coach now. You can't wait till training camp. These conversations have to take place now and during the summer. So everyone's on the same page going into training camp, and they have expectations for the team and themselves going into training camp.
Rick, this has been a lot of fun. Once again, congratulations on a marvelous coaching career. And I'll just say this, if you want to do media, you got something going here, bud.
All right, thanks. We'll see what happens.
Take care.
We're open to anything, man. Take care.
Right on. Thanks, Rick.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's the one and only Rick Bowness, absolute legend, did a tremendous job. And again, going out on top as a finalist for the Jack Adams, and the Jets were a scary team this year. Love the goaltending too. Imagine having Hellebuck every day.
I know they were a weapon throughout the regular season. I got some buddies that follow them closely and are diehards, and they had high hopes. And like he said, there's only one team that's happy at the end of the season, but that was a solid team, and he did not flicker out and die in the game. He was still at the place where coaches would die to get to, and he called her quits. So that's the way to finish, if you ask me. And like he said, he knew it was time, and that was it for him, and a lot of time behind him before he got to that point. So congratulations to him. It's pretty unreal to have that kind of a career in a league that's that high.
I think he's cut from the same cloth of what you and I are in terms of mentality, right? Craig Berube, Brad Treliving, the tough nose, like even his answer indirectly or directly, whatever you want to call it, to the Mitch Marner question, right? Tough conversation have to be had. And that's what I was saying, getting back to the conversation we had earlier on about Marner. Like, I don't care if the Marner camp's pushing back and saying, hey, we're going to play out this contract. You have to have tough combos. You got to sit down and be like, look, Mitch, it's not working here. Whether the conversation goes good or bad, or you think maybe long-term it's in the best interest to see what happens under Craig Berube, I get that. But they have to be having these combos. They just can't roll over and die because something comes out about Marner just being open to playing next season, right?
No, I'm sure they're not. It's what Rick was talking about the hard conversations and getting a buy-in and having a player adjust his game according to what's best for the team, and those all spoke to me as things that the Maple Leafs haven't done in the past when they're running it back. Their identity wasn't conducive to winning a Stanley Cup. The way they handled adversity wasn't conducive to going deep in the playoffs. It's just their whole attitude just wasn't really gritty and desperate and passionate enough to get to where you need to go in the playoffs. And you look at the teams that are still playing, like, look at how they respond together as like a team identity, and how they attack being down a goal or two, or how they continue to put the throttle down when they're up a goal or two, and to get into overtime and to get into penalty trouble and all the things, the adversity that you go through in a game. The teams that are still playing and doing well, they know who they are, and they have 100% buy-in, where it doesn't matter where you go on the roster, forward, D, top six, bottom six, star guy, role guy. They're all on the same page, and they're all willing to dig their heels in and do whatever it takes to get over that hump of adversity, and it brings them success. And I'm sorry, you have to have the conversations with the players on the Leafs, if you ask me, about getting to that place and adopting that mindset, because they just don't have it. We've seen year after year after year, they run into, trouble, and they just have this stunned look on their face and no one does anything about it. And that to me is culture, that's identity, and that's what needs to change in Toronto with the personnel. And if you have players that you've given a chance to do that and to find it and they haven't done it, then maybe you got to move on. It's a sad reality. Like he says, they're tough conversations, but they need to happen.
Killer instinct is the word I would use as well. And I'll just put this out there. I think there is a growing semblance that the Leafs could be hesitant to make a move of this stature because they're worried that it could turn into Nazem Kadri 2.0. That Marner can go somewhere else. He can be a breakout star. He can do his thing in the playoffs and win a Stanley Cup. Let me just say right now, plain and simple, if that's the mentality, the wrong people are running this job. They really are. The wrong people are running the front office here if they're going to think that way, where it's like, man, it's a game of poker sometimes. It's a game of risk. Just ask the Florida Panthers. Do you think they really wanted to, like, they knew they were getting Matthew Tkachuk, but at the time, Jonathan Huberdeau was a bona fide star for them, 100-point plus player. He was everything to that fabric, everything to that culture. They made the decision, and look at them now. Sometimes you got to make tough decisions. That's why these guys are paid big bucks.
Yeah, they traded a franchise, high-end, high-paid, high-skill player in order to get better where they thought they needed to get better and to adapt themselves to being more of a playoff style team. And holy smokes, did they ever do that? And I keep talking about the Florida Panthers and how they're built, and it's just like ungodly how suited they are for the playoffs, and they've had nothing but success since making that move. But yeah, it's not like if a Marner trade gets made, make no mistake, he's going to go to his new team. He's going to continue to have success. He's going to be an all-star. He's going to play against the Maple Leafs. He's going to score a goal against them at some point. But and it's going to be a story, and you're going to hear people saying, "Can't believe we got rid of him too." Oh, the history of getting rid of good players and them coming back to bite them. Like, it's going to be a story just because of the market. But at the end of the day, if you look at your team and you have the power, you're running the team, to say, I can see and I can tell, and it's been proven that this isn't the formula to win. I have to make changes, difficult decisions. It's not going to be perfect, but you got to have the balls to make that change if you believe that it is in the best interest of your team. And we follow this team every day. We see what happens in and out. And I think that if you want to get over the hump and get to that next level, nothing against Mitch Marner, although I am not pleased whatsoever with his playoff performance and his attitude towards it and his effort level and the way he plays hockey in the playoffs. Don't like it at all, but you're going to have to make a significant change. And again, when you look at all the contracts and the construction of the roster, he's the only one that you can really do it to. So it's not personal against Mitch Marner necessarily. It's just something that has to happen, a tough decision. They've got themselves in this position with these contracts and these players and this construction and this design that's from the old regime. If you want to get out of it and you want to break the mold of running it back and losing, big things need to happen. And that's just the one that's the obvious change that has to be made, as difficult as it might be.
Again, it would be utterly idiotic if you sat here on June 4th and said, you know what, we're packing it in. You remember that big trade we were talking about? We're not doing it. I understand your point on being level-headed and decompressing after another miserable and tough Game 7 loss to the Boston Bruins, but it would be, again, the definition of insanity if they ran it back with these guys. If it's not Marner, it's got to be somebody. I don't really agree with Morgan Rielly, because the minute you trade Morgan Rielly, you're looking for a Morgan Rielly, and I would love to see Morgan Rielly with a D partner longer than 6 months. Like, I would look to build upon Rielly. I think he would perform much better if he had some support on that back end. And ultimately, as we've been breaking down for months, Marner has been that guy. Unfortunately, the organization had a window last year. They didn't utilize it, and now they're at the beck and call of a Mitch Marner when it comes to the no movement clauses. But rest assured, there are pressure tactics here, okay? I don't want to come on here and say, okay, Marner doesn't want to go anywhere. He's not going anywhere. I think there's a couple of things you can do to let him know he is going somewhere.
Yeah, it's just about how much pressure they want to apply and how married to the idea are they. And I mean, if you want to make that change and you think it's good for your team, then I think you got to dig your heels in and say, sorry, this is happening one way or the other. And I don't foresee them ever getting to the point where they're like not playing him until he waives or anything crazy like that. But, negotiations and agents, things can get stale and things can get
Yeah.
ugly. And I think they're treading lightly in the beginning because they want to avoid going to a place where there's animosity between the two parties. And rightfully so. That's not a fun place to be.
The only thing I can think of is that they're like, you know what? We got a new coach, Craig Berube. If he can't figure this out, then we make the trade. Or they're not going to make a trade. They're going to just let him walk to free agency. But again, that's their problem to figure out. But I don't even want to think about that idea of Mitch Marner being in training camp. I just think it is time for a drastic change, because if you're not trading him, you're probably not trading Riley, which tells me you're coming back with the same team, which tells me I'm going to be the same pissed off host at least one you take next spring when you lose in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's just, I don't know what else to add. Again, we're going to monitor over the next month. But again, I wouldn't take anything I hear in the media at face value this time of year. It is wacky season. It's silly season. It's crazy season. Just keep that in mind moving forward. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Are there any props you like in the Stanley Cup final? The one number I'm looking at is the 5.5 total. I'm playing the under, I think 5.5 in game 1, but I think as the series decides or, continues along, I think specifically in game 3 and 4, I'd probably play the over. But I'm fascinated from that perspective, the Barkov-McDavid matchup in that series, Rosie.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting. He's a solid two-way forward, Barkov. McDavid is who he is. It'll depend on, I don't know. I want to see the puck drop. I want to see the first period and see the matchup, see the vibe, see the momentum shift, see who's sustains control the most, and kind of get a feeling of how these two teams match up. The Oilers are kind of always just a crapshoot for me. They can be so good, but they can kind of fall off the planet too. So that inconsistency makes it tough for me to definitively say this is what I think is going to happen this series. But I do know that the Oilers have been underestimated a couple of series in a row and have absolutely, convincingly won, especially this past series where no one gave them a chance to beat the Dallas Stars with their depth and the way they're constructed. And they smoked them at home in 6. I mean, a couple hiccups earlier on, but that was convincing to get it done, not to go to game 7, to get it done at home when they needed to. Usually that is the most difficult game to win. And they had it, you could break down the game all you want, but they jumped out to a 2-goal lead and held on to it for the rest of the game. So I think they could be dangerous, man. I want to see the beginning of the game and see how it goes and get my bets from there. But after that, I mean, just, any McDavid, Draisaitl props type things. If you see they're going to be shooting or, dishing, you could jump on those types of things. But I'm going to wait until I get a sense of this thing before I start throwing numbers around. Probably not what you want to hear.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Looking forward to game 1 on Saturday. I've mentioned to you off air, I'm going to be there. I'm heading down to Florida on Thursday. So Zach Phillips is going to be hosting here on Thursday and Friday, and I'll be a media day.
Zacharias are going to
be
your
guy.
Thing, eh? You never miss a show. This is crazy.
Yeah, I had the Phil Kessel streak going, but I got to be at the Stanley Cup final, man. I just got to check this out. I think it's going to be a great series. So I'll be in Florida for game 1. I'm also going to Edmonton for game 3 and 4. So a lot's on the horizon. Maybe we meet up too, man. Might be close to you in Olds, Alberta next week.
Well, if you're going to game 3 and 4, I think I better be there as well. So we'll chat. We'll chat with the powers that be.
Sounds good. All right. The Ottawa Senators have officially hired Mike Yeo and Nolan Baumgartner as assistants on Travis Green's coaching staff. They'll join holdovers Daniel Alfredson and Ben Sexton, that according to Chris Johnson. So as we speculated, shortly after we did a whole segment on Mike Yeo potentially to Toronto, it sounded like he was earmarked for Ottawa, and that's where he's headed. That's going to do it, Rosie. I guess I won't see you till I think I'm going to guest on Friday's show, by the way. I'm going to come on Friday's show with you and Zach, but Anthony Stewart's going to be co-hosting with me tomorrow.
Cool, baby. That sounds good. An interesting week to finish and lots to be excited about on the weekend.
Yes, sir. That is Jay Rosehill. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Our guy, Will Farmer, nowhere to be found today, unfortunately, but at the Leafs Nation 401, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Many thanks to Rick Bowness, longtime NHL head coach, now recently retired, for hopping on. I think gave some unique perspective moving forward. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcasts. And don't forget to visit LeafsNation.com. Many thanks to producer Vic and to Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk tomorrow. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.